The first man locked the front door from the inside, and every tired face in the diner understood at once that the storm outside had just come in wearing a wool overcoat. He did it gently, almost politely, turning the small brass latch beneath the faded sign that read, "Please seat yourself," then rested 2 fingers against the front of his jacket where something heavy pressed against the fabric. At the far end of the room, Mara Ellison sat trapped in a red vinyl booth with rain dripping from the ends of her hair onto a paper placemat printed with local tire shop coupons. Only that morning, a magazine had called her the most powerful woman in American medical technology. Only that morning, she had been walking through the polished lobby of Ellison Meridian under a glass ceiling 5 stories high, while assistants moved around her as if she bent time by entering a room. Now she was barefoot because one of her heels had snapped in a drainage ditch behind a bus station. Her silk blouse was plastered to her skin, and her whole body shook so hard the spoon beside her coffee cup rattled like a warning bell. The second man stepped in through the back entrance by the restrooms. The third stayed by the kitchen doors. The others spread out along the windows with the patience of people who had practiced more than once how to make strangers disappear. Mara's eyes went to the man sitting across the aisle from her, a broad-shouldered tow truck driver with a gray thermal shirt, a stained canvas coat, and a little girl asleep against his side. He had noticed the men, she could tell, but he had not moved. He was still cutting a pancake into small, careful squares, though the child's fork had fallen from her hand and syrup had soaked into the sleeve of her yellow sweater. "They found me," Mara whispered, the words leaving her as though pulled out by force. "Please, take your daughter and get away from me." The man looked at her for the first time with his whole attention. His eyes were a washed-out blue-gray, calm in a way that made no sense. "Ma'am," he said softly, "nobody gets away by standing up too fast." 3 hours earlier, Mara had still believed money could outrun danger. She had believed this the way other people believed in gravity. Money had built the research towers in Cambridge, the manufacturing plants in Pennsylvania, the clinics in rural counties that bore her family's name. Money had bought privacy, bodyguards, attorneys, silence, distance, and doors that opened before her hand reached the handle. At 41, she controlled Ellison Meridian, a biomedical logistics giant that moved vaccines, cancer therapies, emergency blood supplies, and surgical robotics through half the hospitals in the country. Her father had founded the company out of a rented warehouse when Mara was 11, and she had taken it over after his stroke, turning it from a respected regional firm into an empire so valuable that governors took her calls from private dinners. She was not cruel, not exactly, but she had become hard in the way powerful people sometimes mistake for wisdom. She measured loyalty in contracts and friendship in usefulness. She had not cried when her marriage ended, had not paused when old employees said she no longer knew anyone's name, had not looked twice at the janitor who rode the elevator with her at midnight. That night, in her private office above the Charles River, she had been reading a sealed folder left by a compliance officer named Ruth Bell, a thin, nervous woman who had requested a meeting and then failed to appear. Inside the folder was not one scandal, but a buried city of them. Graham Vale, Ellison Meridian's chief operating officer, had been pledging company-owned patents as collateral to offshore lenders tied to a trafficking syndicate. He had built shell charities, fake disaster relief invoices, phantom shipments of pediatric medicine, and a network of bribes that reached into law firms, private security groups, and 2 members of Mara's board. The final page was a message from Ruth written in blue ink with a shaking hand. "If you are reading this, he knows I talked. Don't trust company security. Don't trust your phone. Don't go home." Mara had wanted to believe there was some cleaner explanation because the truth was too large to fit in a single breath. Then her office computer froze. The elevator panel outside her suite went dark. Her assistant's line rang once and disconnected. Through the glass wall, across the executive floor, she saw two security men step out of the stairwell, not the familiar guards who joked with reception, but contractors in black coats moving with clipped, rehearsed purpose. She had taken the folder, the encrypted drive taped beneath it, and nothing else. She ran down 22 flights of service stairs in stocking feet until her lungs burned. In the loading bay, a delivery driver shouted after her when she climbed into the back of an idling linen truck, but he must have seen her face because he did not stop her. By the time she reached Worcester, she had traded a diamond bracelet for a ride with a woman hauling produce, thrown her phone into a canal, and learned that terror had a taste, metallic and dry, like biting your own tongue. The storm drove everyone off the road except truckers, police, and fools. Mara got out near the old turnpike exit when the driver said she could go no farther, and the only light open for miles was Mercy's Table, an all-night diner wedged between a shuttered motel and a diesel station. Its sign buzzed in the rain. The coffee smelled burnt. The waitress looked through Mara as if ruined rich women wandered in every Thursday. Mara chose the booth nearest the back because it faced both doors. She tried to think like someone who survived things instead of someone who ordered people to handle them. She had no phone, no coat, no weapon, no ally, and no idea whether Ruth Bell was alive. The drive inside her blouse felt hot against her ribs. It contained records that could send Graham Vale to prison, destroy the board, and perhaps take Mara down with them if he shaped the story first. She had built her life to avoid helplessness. Yet helplessness had found her under fluorescent lights between the pie cooler and the lottery machine. The tow truck driver had arrived about 15 minutes after she did, carrying his daughter through the rain with the tenderness of a man holding a candle against the wind. He pushed the door open with his shoulder, turned sideways so the little girl would not get wet, and stamped his boots twice on the mat. "Evening, Inez," he called to the waitress, not loudly. "You still serving breakfast?" The waitress, a heavy-set woman with silver hair twisted into a knot, gave him the tired smile people save for regulars who do not cause trouble. "For you and that baby, Silas, I'll burn eggs any time." The girl, maybe 7, lifted her head from his shoulder and murmured, "I want pancakes shaped like moons." "Round, then," the man said. "That's most pancakes, Nell." Mara had watched them because fear sharpens attention in strange directions. Silas Ward looked poor in the practical, unembarrassed way of people who work too hard to care who sees it. His coat was patched at one elbow. His knuckles were split and darkened with grease. A name stitched on his shirt read Ward Recovery and Towing, though one corner had come loose. He carried no umbrella. The little girl's backpack had a broken zipper held together with a safety pin. Still, when he slid into the booth across from Mara's, he placed Nell on the inside, away from the aisle, wiped rain from her cheeks with a napkin, and asked the waitress for warm milk before coffee. That small act unsettled Mara more than it should have. Her own father had once warmed her hands around paper cups in warehouses while forklifts beeped in the dark. She had not thought of that in years. When her trembling knee shook the shared booth frame, Silas glanced over and said, "You're making the whole bench dance." Mara stared at him, offended by the ordinary complaint. "Excuse me?" "My girl's trying to draw a horse," he said, nodding toward Nell's paper menu and crayons. "Right now it's coming out like a horse in an earthquake." Nell looked up with solemn concern. "It's not a horse, it's a unicorn that works at a gas station." For one cracked second, Mara almost laughed. Then headlights swept the windows and she flinched so violently hot coffee spilled across her hand. Silas slid a stack of napkins across the aisle before she asked, "You ought to put cold water on that." "I'm fine." "No, you're rich and scared. That's different from fine." The words were mild, but they struck like an insult because they were accurate. Mara drew herself upright, gathering the last scraps of authority around her. "You don't know anything about me. I know you came in from the east on foot in a storm, because your right side's wetter than your left and the wind's blowing west. I know you're used to people answering when you speak, because you keep looking at the waitress like she's a broken intercom. I know those shoes weren't made for gravel, and I know you've checked the front door 19 times since I sat down. He took a drink of coffee and made a face. I also know that whatever you're carrying is important enough that you keep touching your ribs like you're making sure your heart didn't run off without you. Mara's hand froze against the hidden drive. The man's gaze dropped just briefly, then returned to his daughter. No hunger for information showed on his face, no greed, no fear. That made him more frightening, not less. "Are you a cop?" she asked under her breath. "No, ma'am." "Private security?" "Sometimes I pull cars out of snowbanks for people who think all-wheel drive means immortality." "This is not funny." "I wasn't laughing." Nell's head drooped against his arm, syrup shining at the corner of her mouth. Silas lowered his voice. "I don't need your story. I'm here because my babysitter's furnace quit. My night driver called in sick, and my kid wanted pancakes after spending 4 hours in a tow truck. But if trouble walks through that door and you're the reason, I need to know whether to put her in the kitchen." Mara looked toward the front windows where rain ran in silver ropes. "You should leave now." "Can't. She's asleep, and my truck's got a cracked distributor cap. We're waiting on a part from my brother." "You don't understand the kind of men he'll send. Most men are the same kind once they decide they're allowed to hurt people." Silas said it without bitterness. That plain sentence, spoken by a man with grease on his sleeves, frightened her more than Graham Vale's threats ever had. She told him less than half of it because habit still guarded her, even when there was nothing left to guard. She said a senior executive had stolen from her company. She said there was evidence. She said people who should have protected her had chosen money instead. Silas listened without interrupting, one hand resting lightly on Nell's back as the child slept. The diner hummed around them with the exhausted sounds of late-night America. Rain on the metal awning, the refrigerator case clicking on, a trucker coughing into his fist, Inez scraping plates into a gray tub. When Mara finished, Silas did not look surprised. He looked sad, which irritated her. "Don't pity me," she said. "I'm not." "You have that face. This is just my face. I can pay you," she said suddenly. "If you help me reach a federal office, a newsroom, any secure line, I can pay you more than this diner makes in 10 years. Silas looked at her then, really looked, and something in his expression closed. "You hear yourself?" Mara flushed. "I'm trying to survive." "I believe you, but money isn't always a rope. Sometimes it's the rock tied to your ankle." She almost snapped back, but the front door opened before she could. A young state trooper stepped inside, rain dripping from his hat brim, and Mara's whole body jolted with hope. Then she saw the trooper avoid looking in her direction. He spoke to the man at the counter, accepted a folded envelope beneath a napkin, and left without ordering. Silas had seen it too. His jaw tightened once. "Friend of yours?" he asked. Mara shook her head. "No. His." A long silence settled between them. It was the first time Mara admitted aloud that Graham's reach was not theoretical. It had entered the room, bought coffee, and walked back into the storm. When the black vehicles finally arrived, they did not roar in like movie villains. That was the terrible part. They came quietly, 4 dark SUVs gliding into the puddled lot with their headlights off until the last moment. Men emerged beneath black umbrellas, their shoes avoiding puddles, their faces calm. One spoke into his cuff, another circled toward the kitchen, a third paused near Silas's tow truck, took a photograph of the plate, and moved on. Mara's breath vanished. She heard herself make a small sound, not a word, more like an animal caught under a wheel. Silas turned to Nell and brushed the hair from her forehead. "Bean," he whispered. "Headphones." The little girl stirred without opening her eyes. Thunder? Something like that. From the backpack, he removed purple noise-canceling headphones decorated with peeling star stickers and fit them gently over her ears. Then he lifted her, still wrapped in sleep, and laid her lengthwise on the booth seat with his coat folded beneath her head. Every motion was careful and unhurried. Mara wanted to scream at him to hurry, but his calm held her in place better than any command. "Listen to me," she said, barely breathing. "Those men are not here to threaten me. They're here to erase me. If you are near me, they will erase you too." Silas slid from his booth into hers, sitting beside her with the ease of a tired husband joining an argument already in progress. He picked up her menu and held it between them. "Then stop looking like prey." "What?" "Lean toward me, not away. Angry, not scared." "I am scared. I didn't ask what you are. I said what to show." The front door opened. The little bell above it gave a cheerful jingle that felt obscene. The man who entered first was lean, clean-shaven, and silver at the temples, with a raincoat that probably cost more than Silas's truck. Mara knew him from a board security briefing. Rafe Colton, former military intelligence, now director of special operations at Northbridge Strategic, a private security firm Graham used whenever he wanted something done without minutes or witnesses. Colton's eyes moved over the diner once, not quickly, not slowly, and dismissed everyone who did not matter. Then they came back to Mara. He walked toward her booth wearing an expression that belonged at a country club luncheon, not a manhunt. "Ms. Ellison," Colton said, "you've made a difficult evening more difficult than necessary." Mara tried to answer, but her throat would not work. Silas did not look up from the menu. "We're not done ordering." Colton's gaze shifted to him with faint distaste. "Sir, you need to take your child and step outside. It's raining." That wasn't a suggestion. Sounded like one from here. The diner became so quiet Mara could hear grease popping on the flat-top grill. Colton placed one hand on the back of the booth and leaned down, bringing with him the clean smell of expensive wool and cold air. "You have no idea what you're interrupting." Silas folded the menu and set it down. "A kidnapping, from the looks of it." Colton smiled without warmth. "A welfare escort for an unstable executive who has stolen proprietary materials. That what you're calling it?" "That is what it is." "Funny. She looks sober to me." Colton's eyes hardened. "Mechanic, tow driver, whatever you are, this is your opportunity to remain a witness instead of becoming a complication." Silas glanced past him to the men by the doors, counting without seeming to count. "How many outside?" Colton's smile thinned. "Enough." That usually means not enough. Mara turned her head slowly toward Silas. His voice had changed, not louder, not theatrical. It had simply lost the rough, weary edges of a man who had spent the night under engines. What remained was level and cold, with command buried so deep it did not need volume. Colton noticed too. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. Silas leaned back, one arm along the booth behind Mara, blocking her from the aisle. "You have 10 seconds, he said. "Use them well." Colton stared. "For what?" "To remember the last time somebody told you not to put guns near my family." The first 3 seconds showed nothing but irritation. Colton's mouth curved as if preparing to laugh. At 4, his eyes narrowed on Silas's face. At 5, they dropped to the scar running from Silas's left ear down under the jaw, pale against weathered skin. At 6, his shoulders shifted back half an inch. At 7, the color began to leave him. Mara watched the recognition move through the room before she understood it herself. It started in Colton's eyes, a widening that stripped away manners in training and left only memory. By 8, his hand had come off the booth. By 9, one of the men at the front lifted his jacket, sensing danger he could not identify. "Don't!" Colton snapped, and the word cracked like a whip. The man froze. Silas looked at the clock above the pie cooler. 10. Colton took a step back so abruptly he nearly struck the table behind him. "Mr. Ward," he said, but his voice had gone thin. "I didn't recognize—" "No," Silas said. "You didn't. We were told she was alone. People say that right before they discover they were misinformed." Colton's breathing had changed. The polished operator who had entered the diner with silent authority now looked like a boy called before a judge. "Lower your weapons," he ordered without turning. "All of you. Hands visible." The men hesitated. Colton spun toward them with panic sharpened into fury. "Now!" Jackets closed. Hands lifted. The man by the kitchen door swallowed hard. Mara sat motionless, the side of her leg pressed against Silas's, feeling as if the floor had tipped beneath the booth. She had seen senators flatter her, bankers fear her, surgeons defer to her, but she had never seen armed men look at someone poor with that kind of dread. Silas reached for Nell's fallen fork and placed it neatly on a napkin, as though manners still mattered. "Rafe Colton," he said. "Northbridge Strategic. Boston office. You used to run extraction teams in North Africa before you decided domestic contracts paid better." Colton lowered his eyes. "Yes, sir." "Sir." The word landed in Mara's chest. Silas Ward, tow driver, pancake cutter, father with grease under his nails, had just been addressed like a commanding officer by a man hired to kill her. "Who signed the order?" Silas asked. Colton's jaw worked. "Graham Vale." "Directly?" "Through counsel and a secondary authorization from 2 board members. We were told Ms. Ellison had suffered a breakdown and stolen sensitive research." "Were you also told to lock the doors of a diner with civilians inside?" "No, sir." "Were you told to bring weapons within 6 feet of a sleeping child?" Colton's eyes flicked to Nell, and something like shame crossed his face. "No, sir. Yet here we are." Silas's voice never rose, which made it worse. A shouting man can be measured. This quiet one could not. Mara found her voice at last, but it came out as a whisper. "Who are you?" Silas did not answer her. He looked at Colton. "You still using Granite accounts for discretionary payment?" Colton's face tightened again. "I don't know that I should." Silas tilted his head. "Try that sentence one more time." Colton swallowed. "Yes, sir. Granite accounts. Then Graham paid outside the books." "Yes." "And Northbridge Command approved an armed domestic retrieval without verification?" Colton hesitated too long. Silas's gaze hardened. "Rafe." "No, sir. It was a private side contract. Vale said there would be no law enforcement issue. He said she had no protection." Silas gave a humorless breath. "Protection. That's what men like him think people are. Assets under guard until someone pays more." He turned slightly toward Mara. "Do you have the evidence?" Mara's hand moved instinctively to her ribs. "Yes." "Good." Then to Colton, "You and your men are going to leave this diner. You're going to drive to the service road by mile marker 113 and wait for instructions from Ada Reeve. You will not call Graham. You will not call your office. You will not so much as sneeze into a device I haven't cleared." Colton nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." "And Rafe?" "Sir." Silas leaned forward. "If one frightened waitress, one trucker, one cook, or my daughter has to remember your face in a nightmare, I will buy Northbridge before breakfast and turn every hallway you walk down into a deposition." Colton's lips parted. "You still have that authority?" Silas looked tired then, deeply tired. I never lost it. I just stopped using it. Colton bowed his head, not dramatically, but with the helpless obedience of a man who knew the ground beneath him belonged to someone else. Within a minute, the men were gone. The locks were turned back, and the storm outside swallowed the SUVs. For a while, nobody spoke. The cook leaned through the service window holding a spatula like a weapon he had already realized would not help. Inez stood by the coffee machine with one hand pressed to her chest. A trucker in a cap whispered a prayer under his breath. Nell slept through all of it, her small hand curled around a crayon. Silas took off her headphones but left her undisturbed. Mara could not stop staring at him. Her mind moved through names and rumors the way a person in a dark attic searches for a light switch. Ward. Silas Ward. It meant nothing at first because the name was too plain. Then another name surfaced from the private vocabulary of billionaires, defense committees, and sealed arbitration files. Ward Meridian Group. Not Ellison Meridian. Ward Meridian. A coincidence? No. She remembered an old profile buried behind paywalls, a grainy photograph from 15 years earlier of a younger man in dress uniform standing beside a woman with dark curls, Silas Ward, former Special Operations Commander, founder of Meridian Shield, the discreet security and intelligence firm that had grown so powerful, governments hired it when governments could not be seen asking. It had operated ports during coups, evacuated doctors from war zones, guarded vaccine convoys in failed states, and, according to whispered rumors, ended 3 criminal networks without a single public arrest. 6 years ago, Silas Ward's wife, Tessa, a pediatric trauma surgeon, had died in a bombing outside a clinic in Marseille. Afterward, the man had vanished. Some said he sold his shares. Some said he lost his mind. Some said he had gone into a monastery, or Montana, or the ground. But the people who said those things did so quietly. Mara had heard his name at a dinner in Washington where a retired admiral refused to repeat a joke after Silas Ward was mentioned. She had thought it was theater, the kind of myth men build around other men to make money seem more noble than it is. Now the myth sat across from her under flickering lights, wiping syrup from his daughter's wrist. "You're him," Mara said. Silas did not pretend not to understand. "Depends who's asking." "Silas Ward of Meridian Shield," Inez gasped softly from the counter. Silas winced, as if Mara had named a ghost at a family table. "Not a name I use around my child." "You own Northbridge?" "No. But I own enough of the company that owns enough of the fund that holds enough of Northbridge debt to make arrogant men return phone calls." "That isn't an answer." "It's the only kind that matters at this hour." Mara laughed once, brittle and disbelieving. "I thought you were a tow driver." "I am a tow driver. You command private armies. I fix transmissions too. People can be more than one mistake." The sentence held no self-pity, but it opened a door onto grief so large, Mara looked away. Silas pulled a battered phone from his coat, not the cracked flip phone she would have expected, but a heavy encrypted handset sealed in black rubber. It looked old and military and entirely alive in his hand. He pressed one number and waited. When someone answered, he said, "Ada, it's Silas." The person on the other end must have reacted sharply, because Silas moved the phone a few inches from his ear. "No, this isn't a ghost story. I need a clean room opened, federal liaison woken, and a forensic team on Ellison Meridian before Graham Vale burns his servers. Ruth Bell may be missing. Find her first." His eyes shifted to Mara. "Yes, that Ellison. I'll send you the drive." He listened, his face unreadable. "No press until the evidence is mirrored. Freeze Vale's travel options quietly. Let him think he has one road left. Men like him show you everything when they run." Another pause. Ada, he put a contract team in a diner with Nell asleep 10 feet away. Whatever Ada said then changed the air. Silas lowered his eyes to his daughter. Exactly. He ended the call and sat still for a moment, thumb resting on the edge of the phone. Mara realized his hand was not shaking, but it was not relaxed either. It carried restraint like a physical weight. You could have stopped men like Graham from ever touching my company, Mara said before she could soften it. Exhaustion had stripped her manners. If you still had this power, if you still had people watching these networks, why walk away? Silas looked up slowly. Careful. No, I don't mean... Yes, you do. You think power is a switch good people are obligated to leave on for you. She recoiled as though he had slapped her. That's not fair. Fairness didn't come into the room tonight. Truth did. He looked toward the rain-black windows. My wife believed every child deserved a doctor who wasn't afraid to turn on the lights. She went places I begged her not to go because she said fear was a tax poor people paid to stay alive. The day she died, I had 47 analysts, 3 field teams, satellite coverage, port informants, and half the Mediterranean under watch. None of it mattered. A boy parked a stolen van beside her clinic and walked away. My people saw it 90 seconds too late. His voice remained steady, but Mara could hear the wound beneath each word. After that, everyone wanted me to respond like a king. I responded like a widower. I found the men responsible. I made sure they would never buy another bomb, train another child, or sell another woman. Then I came home to a 3-year-old girl who had started sleeping with her mother's scarf, and I understood something all my money had hidden from me. I had built a world where I could move armies, but I could not make breakfast without burning toast. Nell did not need a king. She needed a father. So I left. Mara had no answer. In her life, leaving power had always seemed like failure, weakness, or a strategy for gaining more later. She had never considered it might be an act of love. Silas's gaze softened, though not for her. I tow cars because broken things arrive honestly. A woman slides off an icy road. A kid locks his keys in a truck. A family gets a flat on the way to a funeral. You help, they pay what they can, you go home tired, no shell accounts, no blood washed through invoices. He gave a faint, weary smile. And Nell likes riding shotgun. Mara felt shame rise hot beneath her fear. She thought of the hundreds of people whose names appeared on her payroll as numbers, whose departments she had cut by percentage, whose lives had been rearranged in conference rooms with catered lunches. She thought of Ruth Bell, who had come to her office pale with dread and had been told by Mara's assistant to submit documentation through proper channels. Proper channels had almost gotten Ruth killed. I didn't see it, Mara said. Any of it. I was in the building every day, and I didn't see what they were turning us into. Silas studied her, and she hated how badly she wanted him to believe her. Not seeing can be innocent once, he said. After that, it becomes a decision. The words landed heavily, but not cruelly. Perhaps that was why they hurt. What happens now? Now you give me the drive. She hesitated. Everything she had left was inside that small encrypted case. Her authority, her defense, her father's company, maybe Ruth's life. Handing it to a stranger, even this stranger, felt like stepping off a bridge because someone promised the river would hold. Silas seemed to understand. He did not reach for it. He only waited. Nell shifted in sleep and murmured, "Moon pancakes?" Silas brushed her hair back. "Still here, Bean." Mara removed the drive from inside her ruined blouse. The metal was warm from her body. She placed it on the table between them beside a smear of syrup and a blue crayon. A strange, almost ridiculous thought struck her. Empires should not be decided next to children's breakfast drawings. Silas picked up the drive with 2 fingers. Password? My mother's maiden name, the year my father opened his first warehouse, and the name of the compliance officer who made the copy. Ruth Bell. Yes. He nodded once, as if honoring someone absent. Then Ruth gets found first. He made another call, shorter this time, giving strings of numbers, account references, names Mara had not spoken aloud. It became clear he already knew more than he should. Not everything, but enough. Graham had not merely stolen from Mara's company. He had borrowed pieces of old security infrastructure Silas had built and buried, then used them like stolen uniforms. That, more than Mara's danger, had pulled Silas Ward back into the life he had abandoned. By dawn, Mercy's table had become the strangest command post Mara had ever seen. No one shouted. No one rushed. Yet the world moved because Silas asked it to. A woman named Ada Reeve appeared on a secure video link, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, wearing a robe over what looked like tailored pajamas, with a wall of monitors glowing behind her. She greeted Silas not with surprise, but with the quiet anger of an old friend who had feared this day would come. "Ruth Bell is alive," Ada said, and Mara pressed both hands over her mouth. "Barely. Local police logged her as a drunk driver after a single car crash outside Lowell. No alcohol in her blood. She's in surgery under an assumed patient number. Our people are there now." Mara closed her eyes. The relief was so sudden it hurt. Ada continued. "Graham Vale is at his penthouse. Private jet filed for departure to Bermuda at 6:20. His wife and sons are not with him. He emptied 3 personal accounts and attempted to trigger a server purge 12 minutes ago. We stopped the purge. His board allies are calling one another, not him, which tells me they've decided who to sacrifice." Silas leaned over the table, one hand around a coffee cup he had not drunk from in an hour. "Let him reach the car." Ada's mouth tightened. "You sure?" "Yes. I want the bag in his hand, the passport in his pocket, and fear doing the talking." Mara stared. "You're letting him escape?" "No," Silas said. "I'm letting him confess to himself." Ada glanced at Mara through the screen. "Ms. Ellison, by 9 o'clock you will be described publicly as a cooperating executive who uncovered an internal criminal conspiracy. That is true enough to stand, but you need to understand that federal prosecutors will still ask why your governance systems failed this badly." Mara swallowed. "They should." Ada's eyes sharpened, perhaps hearing something she had not expected. "Good. Then say that when the cameras come." Silas looked at Mara, and for the first time she saw not judgment, but a narrow opening through which she might still become someone better than she had been. Outside, the rain thinned to mist. In the far corner, Inez refilled everyone's coffee without charging for it, though she moved around Silas now with stiff, reverent unease. He noticed and sighed. "Inez," he said, "please don't start treating me like a funeral director." She pointed the coffee pot at him. "Honey, I don't know what you are, but you tip regular, and your little girl says thank you. That'll do for me." The interruption came at 6:03, not from Graham's men, but from a black sedan that pulled into the lot alone. Silas saw it before anyone announced it. He stood and placed himself between the window and Nell, who had woken groggy and was now eating cold pancake pieces with her fingers. "Stay with Ms. Ellison," he told her. Nell blinked at Mara with sleepy curiosity. "Are you Daddy's friend?" Mara, who had negotiated mergers worth more than small cities, found herself undone by the question. "I think I'm someone your daddy helped." Nell nodded, accepting this as a category she understood. "He helps people when their cars are sad." "I'm learning that." Silas stepped outside into the mist. Mara watched through the glass as an older man emerged from the sedan, tall and stooped, wearing a clerical collar beneath a raincoat. No guards, no weapon visible. Silas's posture changed, not softening exactly, but absorbing the blow of familiarity. The two men spoke beside the gas pumps for several minutes. The priest handed Silas a small envelope. Silas did not open it at first. He looked away toward the gray light over the highway, then finally broke the seal. Whatever he read made him close his eyes. When he returned, the air around him had shifted. Nell ran to him, and he lifted her with one arm. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yes, Bean. You look like when the truck broke and you said a grown-up word in your head." He smiled faintly. "That's about right." Mara waited until Nell went to show Inez her unicorn drawing. "What was that?" she asked. Silas folded the envelope and put it inside his shirt pocket. "Tessa's old hospital kept a fund for children whose families couldn't pay. I've been covering it anonymously. Graham's laundering network used one of the fund's sister charities as a pass-through." Mara felt the blood leave her face. "My company?" "Your company's name?" His hands. He looked toward his daughter. Tessa's name was on one of the false invoices. The shame in Mara deepened into something almost unbearable. "Silas, I didn't know. I believe you." Somehow that made it worse. He turned back to her. "But by the end of today, the country will know. Not because I want revenge, because a dead woman's mercy was used to hide dirty money and living people got hurt while you and your board admired quarterly growth." Mara nodded, tears burning behind her eyes. For years she had thought crying in business was surrender. Now she understood there were things a decent person ought not be able to discuss dry-eyed. At 6:20, Graham Vale walked out of his Boston penthouse with a leather overnight bag, a navy suit, and the expression of a man irritated by inconvenience rather than hunted by consequence. Ada had routed the building's security cameras to Silas's phone, and Mara watched the footage with a cold knot forming in her stomach. Graham was 53, handsome in the polished, bloodless way of men who spend other people's lives under good lighting. He had been her father's favorite hire, the man who remembered birthdays, sent flowers to widows, and could make a room full of investors believe austerity was compassion. He had called Mara kiddo until the day she became CEO, then smoothly shifted to Madam Chair without a flicker of resentment. On the screen, he checked his watch as the elevator descended. "He doesn't know?" Mara asked. "He knows enough to run," Silas said. "Not enough to understand from what." The elevator opened into the private lobby. Graham stepped out and stopped. Two people waited there, a federal agent Mara recognized from televised hearings and a woman in a charcoal suit holding a tablet. Behind them stood Rafe Colton, pale and silent. Graham turned, but the elevator doors had closed. The agent spoke. There was no audio, but Mara saw Graham's laugh. It was small, dismissive, almost bored. Then the woman with the tablet showed him something. Graham's face changed. Not fear yet. Calculation. He reached for his phone. It did not work. He looked toward the lobby doors. Outside, police vehicles rolled up without sirens. Only then did fear arrive. First in the eyes, then in the mouth, then in the shoulders. His overnight bag slid from his hand to the marble floor. Mara expected to feel triumph. Instead, she felt grief, not for Graham, but for the years she had sat across from him trusting competence more than character. Silas turned the screen off before the agents cuffed him. "You didn't want to watch?" Mara asked. "No. After what he did, especially after what he did. If justice needs me to enjoy it, it's already turning into something else." Mara looked at him, humbled by a discipline she did not yet possess. By mid-morning, the world Mara had known was burning in public. News helicopters circled Ellison Meridian's headquarters. Federal agents carried sealed boxes through the lobby while employees stood on sidewalks clutching phones and paper cups, their faces stunned. Board members who had once corrected Mara's tone in meetings now hid behind attorneys. The company's stock halted. Cable anchors used words like systemic fraud, humanitarian aid laundering, illegal collateralization of medical patents, and executive betrayal. Ruth Bell survived surgery, and when Ada told Mara, Mara turned away from the others and wept in the restroom with one hand pressed against the cracked sink. Silas did not intrude. He sat with Nell in the last booth, helping her sound out words from a children's book Inez had found under the counter. The contrast split Mara open. While her empire convulsed, this man listened patiently as his daughter stumbled through a sentence about a rabbit finding its way home. Around noon, Ada arranged secure transportation to a federal building in Boston. Before leaving the diner, Mara asked for 5 minutes alone with Inez. She did not know why until she was standing by the register, looking at the handwritten sign taped there. Help wanted. Nights. Ask for Inez. I owe you for the table, the coffee, and the trouble, Mara said. Inez crossed her arms. Coffee's $2. Trouble's on the house. Your back door lock is broken. The west window doesn't latch. The roof leaks over the third booth. You inspecting me now? No, Mara said. Seeing you. Inez's expression changed slightly. Mara took a business card from the lining of her soaked jacket, though the ink had run at the edges. Tomorrow, someone from a foundation will call. Not Ellison Meridian, my personal foundation. No publicity, no name on a plaque unless you want one. Repairs, staff wages for 6 months, and a college fund for the cook's boy if he still wants trade school. Inez stared at the card as if it might explode. Why? Mara looked toward Silas and Nell. Because last night I sat in your diner and learned the difference between being looked at and being seen. Inez's eyes softened, but her voice stayed gruff. That little girl likes blueberry pancakes. You remember that if you're going to be grand about things. Mara smiled through exhaustion. I will. The federal interview lasted 6 hours. Mara told the truth, including the parts that made her look negligent. Her attorneys tried twice to narrow her answers. She told them to stop. She described Ruth Bell's warning, the board's pressure, Graham's control over logistics, the private security contract, the false charities, the systems she had trusted because they were profitable and praised. When prosecutors asked why she had not discovered it sooner, she did not blame complexity or growth or bad actors hiding in good faith. She said, because I rewarded results without asking enough about methods, because I mistook fear in my employees for respect, because people tried to warn me and I made warning me difficult. The room went very still after that. Across the table, one prosecutor lowered his pen. Through the glass wall, she could see Silas standing in the hallway with Nell asleep against his chest, his canvas coat wrapped around her. He had changed nothing about himself for this building. The same work boots, the same scarred hands, the same tired face. Yet agents and senior officials moved around him carefully, not out of fear alone now, but out of recognition. Mara wondered how heavy it must be to be both ordinary and impossible, to want only quiet and still carry a name that made dangerous people lower their eyes. When she finally emerged, the sun had set beyond the city, leaving the windows dark and reflective. Ruth is awake, Silas said before she could ask. She asked whether the drive got out. Mara covered her mouth. Can I see her? Tomorrow, if doctors allow. Tonight she needs rest, and you need to decide what kind of company walks into that hospital room with you. I don't know if I deserve to keep it. Deserving isn't the job. Then what is? He shifted Nell's weight gently. Repair. Every day. Without applause if necessary. Mara looked down at her bare feet in borrowed shoes 2 sizes too large, at the dried coffee stain on her sleeve, at hands that had signed too many papers without reading the human cost beneath the numbers. I don't know how. Silas's face softened in the smallest way. Start by listening to the people who were afraid to speak. Then make sure they never have to be afraid of you again. 3 weeks later, Mara returned to Mercy's table without security. The press still camped outside her headquarters, though the story had begun to change. Graham Vale had been indicted on charges so numerous commentators needed graphics to explain them. 2 board members had turned on the others. Northbridge Strategic was under federal review. Ruth Bell, pale but alive, had testified by video from a rehabilitation hospital and become, against her will, a quiet national symbol of professional courage. Mara had resigned from 3 outside boards, suspended executive bonuses, opened a restitution fund for hospitals affected by falsified shipments, and appointed an employee ethics council with power that made her new legal team visibly nervous. Some shareholders called her reckless. Some columnists called it theater. For the first time in years, Mara found she could survive being misunderstood. Mercy's table looked different already. The sign had been repaired, the roof patched, and new locks gleamed on both doors. Inez had refused marble counters, designer lighting, and anything she called rich people nonsense, but she had accepted new wiring, a safer kitchen floor, and raises for her staff. Mara parked a rented sedan by the diesel pumps and stepped inside, carrying no briefcase, no entourage, only a small paper bag. Silas was in the far booth with Nell, exactly where he had been that night, though daylight made everything gentler. Nell was coloring a picture of a tow truck pulling a castle out of mud. Silas looked up, and for a second Mara saw the old caution return. Then he nodded. Ms. Ellison. Mara, she said. If you can. Nell grinned. You're the lady from the Thunder Night. I am. Mara placed the paper bag on the table. Blueberry muffins from a bakery near the hospital. Ruth said they're the only ones worth eating. Silas's expression changed at Ruth's name. You saw her? Yesterday. She told me I still interrupt too much. Sounds like she's recovering. Mara sat only after Nell patted the seat beside her. I wanted to thank you, Mara said to Silas. He started to look away, but she continued. Not with money, not with a plaque or a favor. I wanted to say it plainly while your daughter is here because she should know what kind of father she has. You saved my life, but more than that, you showed me that power without decency is just another weapon left loaded on a table. Silas was silent long enough that Mara thought she had said too much. Then Nell leaned against him. Daddy doesn't like speeches. I'm learning, Mara said. Silas's mouth lifted at one corner. She's right. He walked her outside after Nell returned to her castle drawing. The afternoon was bright and cold, the kind of New England day that makes every edge look clean. Trucks hissed along the highway. Somewhere behind the diner, a mechanic's radio played an old country song. Mara stood beside Silas's tow truck, noticing details she would once have dismissed. The careful way tools were arranged in the bed, the child's booster seat in the cab, the small photograph tucked near the dashboard of a woman with dark curls smiling in hospital scrubs. Tessa? Mara asked softly. Silas followed her gaze and nodded. She would have liked Ruth. I think Ruth would have been terrified of her. Most smart people were at first. They shared a faint smile. Then Mara took a breath. Meridian Shield's old network is being cleaned out of Ellison's systems. Ada's people are overseeing it. I've also ordered a full review of every charity, hospital contract, and emergency shipment touched by Graham's office. If we profited from harm, we repay it. If people were threatened, we protect them. If laws were broken under my roof, we don't bury it. Silas watched her carefully. That will cost you. Yes, maybe control. Maybe. And you're still doing it? Mara looked toward the diner windows where Nell was holding up her drawing for Inez. A little girl asked me if I was someone you helped. I'd like to become someone who deserved the answer. Silas looked away toward the highway, and for a moment the hard lines of his face eased. That's a better start than most. Mara hesitated. Will I see you again? He gave her the look of a man who understood all the questions hidden beneath that one. I hope not for the same reason. And if something like this happens again, don't wait until men with guns arrive to notice your company is sick. She nodded. Fair. He opened the driver's door of the tow truck, then paused. Mara. She turned. Northbridge, Graham, the board. All of them believed you were alone because that's how you built your life. Make sure they're wrong next time. He climbed in before she could answer. Nell pressed her unicorn drawing against the window, and Mara lifted her hand in farewell. Months later, people would tell the story badly. They would make Silas taller, Mara colder, the gunman louder, the diner darker, the timing neater. They would say he destroyed Graham Vale with a phone call, as if justice were magic instead of preparation, loyalty, evidence, and moral lines drawn long before anyone crossed them. They would say Mara Ellison was humbled in a single night, though the truth was slower and more difficult. Humility did not arrive once and stay. She had to choose it in boardrooms when old instincts urged control, in interviews when blame would have been easy, in hospital corridors when Ruth Bell walked with a cane and refused to call herself brave. Mara visited Mercy's table every few weeks, sometimes with Ruth, sometimes alone, never with cameras. She learned that Inez's cook was named Mateo, that the trucker who prayed that night had a wife in dialysis, that Nell loved space books and hated peas, that Silas kept 3 spare blankets in his tow truck because stranded people were often colder than they admitted. He never returned to the shadows in the way the powerful feared. He took calls now and then from Ada, enough to dismantle what had been misused, enough to warn old associates that his silence was not permission. But most mornings he packed Nell's lunch, checked tire pressure, and drove toward broken cars under wide American skies. Mara came to understand that this was not disguise. It was the truest part of him. The man who could make mercenaries tremble also knelt in parking lots to teach his daughter how to tie her shoes. The man whose name could freeze a room still carried coupons for pancake breakfasts at a diner with repaired locks. And when Mara stood months later before her employees, not shareholders, not cameras, but warehouse crews, nurses, drivers, lab technicians, dispatchers, janitors, people whose work had carried her father's dream long after she forgot its weight, she did not speak about resilience or brand trust or market recovery. She spoke about Ruth Bell. She spoke about systems that punish honesty. She spoke about the danger of treating ordinary people as invisible until they are needed. Then she said, voice steady but eyes wet, "The measure of this company will never again be how much power we can gather. It will be how carefully we use what has been placed in our hands." In the back of the room, near the exit, a tow truck driver in a patched canvas coat listened with his daughter on his hip. He did not applaud louder than anyone else. He did not need to. When Mara saw him, she simply nodded, and Silas Ward nodded back. There was no triumph in it, no debt being collected, no kingdom changing hands. Only recognition, the quiet kind, the kind that comes after fear, after truth. After a person who has been underestimated stands firm without raising his voice and reminds the powerful that dignity is not owned by those who sit at the head of the table. Sometimes it waits in a rain-soaked diner beside a sleeping child, wearing work boots, smelling faintly of motor oil, and choosing mercy until justice is required. Sometimes the moment that changes us forever arrives in a rain-soaked diner and looks like a stranger who refuses to back down. Mara Ellison ruled a billion-dollar company, yet she learned that power without decency is just another loaded weapon. When her own COO sent armed men to silence her, it wasn't wealth or connections that saved the night. It was Silas Ward, a tow truck driver who had once commanded a private security empire and walked away to become the father his little girl deserved. Silas reminded us that real strength is measured by the lines we refuse to cross and the people we choose to protect, even when no one is watching. His quiet courage forced Mara to confront the cost of valuing results over integrity and pushed her to rebuild her company on truth, transparency, and human dignity. The lesson is stark and timeless. Success is hollow if it's earned at the expense of compassion, and the smallest act of mercy can turn the tide against injustice. If this story moved you, share your thoughts below. Tell us about a time someone's everyday bravery changed your life. And if you believe the world needs more reminders that kindness is power, smash that subscribe button and join our community for more true, heart-stirring stories every week.